All righty, everyone. Thank you very much for making time on your Tuesday morning to be with us here today. My name is Matt Harms. I'm the founder of Pen for Hire. This webinar is being done in conjunction with Mark Allen Roberts of No Smoke and Mirrors. I'm going to let Mark introduce himself in a second. But Mark and I have worked together fairly extensively over the last year or so. I'll let him speak a little bit to that. But what we wanted to touch on today in this webinar, really, people make a book out to be this giant mountain that you have to climb. And in some cases, it can be. But for many of us on this call, or many of us in the business world, we don't realize just how much writing we do in the course of our daily lives, how much content we have reserved in the bank that we don't even think about how it can translate into a book. So today we want to talk to you about how we can take what you already have, or hopefully based on the steps I'm going to walk you through, how you can envision doing it yourself, or needing a lot less help from a professional like myself, and then turning that book into your secret weapon to increasing business revenue, which is something that Mark has, I think, knocked out of the park with his last three books. So Mark, if you'd be so kind to introduce yourself to everybody, then we'll dive into the presentation.
Sure. My name's Mark Allen Roberts. People ask me why I use my middle name. It's because Mark Roberts is the world's most famous streaker, and in no way does that help me, right? I'm a business growth coach. I help businesses grow what we call driving explosive growth, 20%, 30% year over year. I've been doing it for just under 40 years, and I met Matt. And between Matt and my own coach, who I've had for 30 years, I decided to write a book. And like a lot of people, I thought, wow, writing a book is going to be such a time drain. I'm not a writer. And then you go through that imposter syndrome. Nobody's going to read what I have to write. Everybody knows what I know. And all those things are just mindsets that need to be changed. So what Matt and I did was, I have a blog. It's called No Smoke and Mirrors. It's ranked #1 in the world for fixing sales problems. I've been writing articles probably since 2000. So we have thousands of articles on different content. So working with Matt and his team, what we did was we put together my book, Driving Explosive Growth, by creating categories, basically chapters from my blog. Obviously, Matt and his team, improved the English, in some of the articles, made it flow in a concise way. And we actually created a book called Driving Explosive Growth. I started sharing my book with people. I speak a lot at events and conferences. I started giving my books out, and I spoke at a private equity conference about a year ago. No, maybe I think it was July or August. And there were 60 CEOs in the room, and every one of them got one of my books. And I went over the steps in my book, and I had a long drive home. It was about 9 hours, and about 6 hours into my drive home, three of them had already reached out saying they wanted to work with me. So I have friends who've written books, and they've spent crazy amounts of money, with publishers. And I think there's a place for that. But if you want to write a book to actually grow your business, nothing's more powerful than handing somebody your book as an expert in your category. Something just happens. You write them a little note on the front cover, the first page, and you're seen as an expert. So I'm very thankful to Matt and his team. And then after the first book launched, I had so much feedback on the first book that everybody's like, I want to learn more about this voice of customer thing, because our team actually conducts voice of customer research. So we wrote another book based on content that I already had, whether it was presentations from trade events, blogs, white papers. I wrote an ebook on the topic, and Matt and his team did their magic. And they turned what I already had into a book within months. So I'm a big fan of working with Pen for Hire. And, if you have content, any kind of content, we're working with one team now. He has 500 podcasts that he's done, and they've all been transcribed. He has a book. And, if you want to really grow your business, I highly recommend having a book. When we do Net Promoter Score, we find out if a customer is happy, are they satisfied, but also would they refer people to you? The number one indicator for Net Promoter Score is culture. And how better to share the culture? Well, how better to share what it's like to work with you than to share it in a book? So hopefully that wasn't too long, Matt. And I look forward to the presentation today.
Thank you very much, Mark. And you actually said something that I want to touch on before we get to the end, so we don't glance over it, is sometimes you will write a book and find out that you had so much content on a particular topic or chapter, like Mark did. Voice of Customer was the first chapter, I believe, in his first book. By the time it was said and done and the feedback, that chapter became a book unto itself. So the key is to not feel like you've got to have everything written. There's plenty of books out there that don't cover topics entirely. It's enough for the purpose of the book. And that's something we're going to talk about today, is just making sure whatever you set out to do, you cover in that book. You can always come back later and add more to the book. You can write a whole separate book that really just drills down on a very intense topic like Mark did with Voice of Customer. So before I hit to the next screen, who wants to be brave here and volunteer the 3 reasons most people will do business with you or your company? Nobody? No takers? It's generally because they know, like, and trust you, right? Ideally, all 3 is going to be what gets you into top contention, especially when we're out there trying to differentiate ourselves from other people. And a book is a great way to show people who you are as a business person, as a human being. But there is actually a much bigger way to make an impact. And Mark kind of stole my thunder in his introduction. So I'm not going to ask anyone unless we have short-term memories, but it's culture. Right? Your prospective clients, whether you believe it or not, they're doing business with you or they're detracting because of your culture. It's either going to propel you or detract you. And the problem is your clients aren't telling you this. They're generally not saying, hey, you guys have such an awesome culture here. This is why I've worked with you for the last 5 years. They're also not telling you when they one day just vanish that it was your terrible company culture that caused it. So your book is a way for, before they've ever met you, before you've ever done a discovery call, before you've ever introduced yourself to that prospect, it's a way for them to get a feel for what your personal culture is and the culture that you're going to bring to their workplace if you're consulting for them. So there's a couple companies out there that have really nailed, and I'm only using these examples just because they've nailed the book as a culture piece. I'm not independently endorsing any of these companies or saying they're the best in their industry, but I do want to point out that when it comes to books and culture, Keller Williams in the real estate space is kind of considered the gold standard for real estate culture and training. Anyone who's ever worked for Keller will tell you Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, is absolutely one of the best things they've ever written. It really helps engross new agents in what they can expect when they go to work for Keller Williams. It talks to the support structure, their compensation model. It eliminates all of the guesswork of what they're going to get when they go to work at Keller Williams. That's not to say that maybe Remax and ERA and Better Homes and Gardens don't have the same cultures. They just don't have as prevalent a showing in the book space to back it up. Chick-fil-A. This is one Mark pointed out to me that I wasn't even aware of. And I will say, I know Chick-fil-A can be polarizing because of their beliefs. But regardless of where you stand on that spectrum, the point is, Truett Cathy wrote a book to summarize just how important his people and his principles are, right? So Chick-fil-A is not out there trying to appeal to every single person who wants a chicken sandwich. They're not out there trying to employ every single person who needs a job and is willing to work in a fast food industry. They want to work with and serve people who share their very specific principles and beliefs. And there's nothing wrong with that. He put together a book that succinctly encapsulates that for anyone. So there's no question what you're getting to if you're going to go work at Chick-fil-A. There's no question what you're going to experience as a customer if you step into a Chick-fil-A. And personally, I'd rather know up front if I'm going to enjoy working at a place or interacting with their folks before I go in. Here's my thunder. You can be next. Stop overcomplicating the process. I guarantee you both Gary Keller, Truett Cathy, at some point said, I just don't have the time to write a book. They're both very, very busy individuals. They're both very successful individuals. But what they also knew was they had to have that book. That book was going to be foundational and instrumental. So I challenge you to think, and again, in the next couple of slides, we're going to see some examples of this, and I invite you to question my thought process. But what content do you already have? Mark mentioned he has the #1 sales blog in the world for solving sales problems. One of our examples today is going to be from somebody who has a very robust blog. Newsletters. How often are you sending newsletters to your clients? Even if, like our second example today, it's only a 7-second newsletter. There is valuable content in that 7 second of words, especially when you're doing it every day for years. Do you have a company handbook already in place? Even if it's just a 2 or 3 pager on what you expect your employees, how you expect them to act, look, treat their customers. That could be the basis of your company culture book. Podcast. Mark gave a great example before, 500 podcast episodes transcribed. My friends, that's not just a book. That's probably several books. Webinars. The series Mark and I have done on webinars, at some point, I could write a book on giving you the roadmap for how to write a book from your content, just because we've done enough of these now. Speeches. I can't tell you how many of my clients are public speakers, and they're looking to get to that next level in their career, which is either getting paid instead of doing free speaking or moving to bigger and higher paid stages like TEDx. I can tell you for certain, a book will not guarantee you a spot, but not having a book will almost always guarantee that you're not even going to be in contention. They want to know that you have content. And if you've already been out there speaking, get copies of your old speeches. They live out there somewhere, YouTube, your website, Vimeo, wherever you're storing that, get it transcribed. That is more content for your book. Presentations. I have a client right now. We're starting his project next week. He uploaded about 15 PowerPoint presentations for me that we are going to be using to build the outline of his book, because he teaches giant corporations his decision-making process. And it's all outlined in the presentations that he gets paid a lot of money to go deliver to these companies. I get the privilege of taking what he's already given them and showing him just how to package it so that it looks appropriate in a book. Last thing, honestly, this may not even be an all-inclusive list. If you're thinking of other things and say, Matt, hey, can this be used for a book? Let me know. Chances are probably yes, if it's content. But training manuals, anything you have that you're using in your business on a daily basis can all be used to help you build the book. So before I start diving into our examples, does anyone have any questions, comments, anything they want to dive a little deeper on? Because I know I just threw a lot at you. So feel free to raise your hand or just shout out. We don't have a whole lot of people that I can see, so we can have a free-for-all. All right, I am going to proceed then. So here's our process in action. And don't take our word for it. We're going to look at these real life examples. The first I mentioned, rather robust blog from Avalanche Creative. Ava is on the call. 7-second, Kevin Freeberg also on the call. And I think that to me was very fun, just because they're very, very short. So I invite everyone, head over to Kevin's website and just see what he's sending out to his clients, because these are just short snippet newsletters, but there is so much opportunity to expand on each and every one of them. And then Sharon Johnson, Train 51 Consulting. We're all going to get to experience that one together, because I have not seen it yet. But regardless, the system works the same way. So if you go over to Avalanche's website, you're going to see that they have a massive list of blogs. What I did was, I'm not going to pretend that I read all of them, but the process for trying to build a book is, first, we would have a strategy call, and I would ask Ava what she's intending to accomplish by writing this book, right? Is she looking for more clients? Is she looking for more speaking engagements? Then I'm going to want to know what her definition of success is, and the theme of the book, because Ava, correct me if I'm wrong, you're marketing and advertising, correct? Did we lose Ava?
Yes, yes, that's correct.
Okay.
That's
So depending, what her end goal for that is, maybe she's specifically targeting direct to consumer. Maybe it's a very specific niche topic in advertising and marketing. We would discuss that first before I kind of dive into this little exercise where I just did it to kind of prove a point. So if I was building Ava's book, just looking at her blog, I could see that we could have a chapter on all things direct to consumer, because she had blogs on direct to consumer marketing. Don't ignore TikTok, direct to consumer health and wellness advertising, how direct to consumer brands can benefit from in-game video advertising. I'm identifying themes and I'm lumping together everything that falls under that theme. We may decide, hey, there's way too many topics here, we don't want them all, or that one doesn't really fit. That's fine. It's really just getting good at building these kind of containers. Ava could also have a chapter on privacy and marketing. You had your cookies, privacy issues, and ad blockers. Another one that was similar, but again, just for illustrative purposes. Another chapter for her could have been creating effective marketing campaigns, the power of urgency in your marketing campaigns, the effectiveness of storytelling. As a writer, I mean, that one just jumps right at me in how you can really create an effective campaign. And I'm happy to share this presentation, so don't worry about screen grabbing or taking photos. And I kind of just slowed down here, but she also had a ton of topics on ROI, return on investment on advertising. That can be an entire chapter. That could probably be its own book at some point, right? But the first book, especially if you don't have a book yet, my opinion, there's no right or wrong. You could say, nope, I need an ROI book. This is exactly where my business is going. But I like to believe in giving the world a holistic view of everything you do, all your knowledge, and then kind of like Mark did. Then we really drill down on your areas of specialty. So just getting the point. And then I'm not going to lie to you guys, it took me about 10 minutes just to browse through her website and start lumping these together. I probably could have built an outline in about 30 just from the content she had laid out. 7-second newsletters from Kevin. So, chapter marketing tools. He had a newsletter on it's not a website, it's software. Get better at good enough. Your comedy must be crystal clear. And since his were 7 seconds, I did kind of poke through a little bit of them just to get my wheels turning on how do you turn a 7-second snippet into a chapter. And Kevin, you and I can talk about it, or if you're not already getting ideas, it's actually, I think, quite easy and probably a lot of fun too, since it's just a blank canvas. You could have had another chapter on intellectual property. Be so into what you do, your most unstealable stuff, the last word on logos, pitfalls, whole chapter on pitfalls when clients get too close to the creative, symptoms of future unhappy clients, the new cold call, which was a newsletter all about how your cold outreach in email or however you're marketing them is probably not going to work. So I think we've got Sharon's on the next side. And has Sharon joined us yet, Natasha? I'm going to assume no, but either way, we'll still look at it together. So my point, there's no right or wrong way. It's really first about deciding what do you want to cover in your book. Then you've got to find the content that fits the theme. We just saw from Kevin and Ava, and if you go to their respective websites off of this call, you will see how much content is there. All I had to do was pick and choose, look for keywords, and start moving pieces around the board. This is not rocket science. Any one of you, if you've gotten this far with your writing, can start building your own book just from the content you have. Maybe you want a professional to come in and just help you weave it together, but you're not starting from scratch. You have everything you need. Just transitioning it, putting it in the right order, those are your only challenges at that point. And unless you have a systematic or process-based business where certain pieces have to come in order, there's really no right or wrong way to structure your chapters either. Let's see. I guess we don't have Sharon's stuff here. Natasha, did you have Sharon's stuff in a separate?
It should be on that link on the Google Drive. It should take you to the document. That's all she sent.
Oh, okay. So it's not in the back of the presentation.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Where'd you send it? In my chat, all I have is the link to the presentation.
It's on the presentation itself, but let me send it to you to make it easier.
While I'm pulling this up, please, anyone have any questions? Anything at all? There are
Yeah.
no stupid questions.
I have a question. I have a couple of questions, actually. So you're advocating having a book to give out to people as a way to increase your authority. And my one question is, it seems like people under 30 don't read, and they definitely don't read books. So I guess it would presume that you're marketing to an older audience that actually reads, because I can absolutely tell you, based on some of my employees, that they absolutely do not read. They do not read books. So that's my first question is it worth giving out a book even if they don't read it, just to say, oh, I wrote a book?
So let me tackle that question before we get into your second question. And I'm actually going to let Mark speak to a lot of this one, because quite honestly, you don't care if anyone reads your book. Is it nice if they read your book? Yes. Mark, you had a recent instance where someone read like a half a chapter and decided to hire you, correct?
Yeah, I was actually on a Zoom call. I was doing a webinar, and during the webinar, I mentioned my book. And shortly after the webinar, the president of this company reached out and says, let's have a chat. And by the time we scheduled our Zoom call, he had already purchased the book and was reading it when we were in the Zoom meeting. And like you said, a lot of young folks, they don't read books. What I'm finding is they read the first 3 chapters, and if they like you, if they get a good feel for you, they expect you to, fill in the blanks.
Okay.
But it's going to be the single largest client that I'm picking up this year. Came out of a young man, listening to one of my webinars, buying my book on Amazon, and then reading the first 3 chapters. I'm finding that they get through the first 3 or 4, and I hope people read everything because I put a lot of heart and soul into it, and so did Matt and his team. But you're right. Older, the boomer generation definitely reads books. We grew up reading books. Readers are leaders. But the new generation, they're looking for a quick fix.
Right.
So when you design your book, I recommend that you give them that quick fix in the contents. They might just go to chapter 4. I have a chapter on human to human selling. Some people are just buying the book and using that chapter.
So I'm presuming that you're advocating a self-publishing route, and then you just stick it on Amazon in addition to giving it out. Is that what I'm hearing?
So I never want to use the word advocating, but I do educate everyone up front on what is involved in trying to go a traditional publishing road. So if you're looking to use the book as a business tool, the number of hurdles and roadblocks in a traditional publishing scenario are usually preclusive to getting the book out, because you first need to find a literary agent who's then going to find you a publisher who's interested. Then they've got to fit you into their production run if they are interested. They're going to take complete creative license over what you've presented. And if you don't agree with their suggestions, they don't publish it. So for me personally, and this is in no way to take away from traditional publishing, Business Expert Press, Wiley, they put out a lot of great books. But there are more thought leaders out there with great content than there are traditional publishers to publish it.
Right. It's kind of like, why are people on Substack instead of like going, but I mean, I'm actually writing, I'm actually going the publishing route for a fiction novel that I'm writing. So I understand, like, there was no way I would do a business book that way. I would only self-publish, and I did self-publish a book about 10 years ago on a different topic. But this intrigued me because I've never thought about writing a book about my industry and what I do. And, and I, like you said in the beginning, I thought, why would anyone listen to me? But I do have a lot of content, so I could see perhaps doing that. And
That's
you know, I don't have a lot of in-person meetings and my industry is kind of narrow. So, you know, I don't just sell to every corporation. So I sell to a very small targeted group of people. So I I guess my question is, if I have a much narrower target market, is it still worth having a book if you only go to like 2 conferences a year and basically know everyone there? Like,
It actually, in my opinion, and Mark, you can chime in on this as well. It makes it more important and more valuable because when you're dealing in a narrow silo, you have a much smaller potential pool of clients, which means that they have a bigger selection of people. Your win rate percentage is going to be less. But when you're the person in the room with the book, and any of your topics speaks to that client's specific pain point at that time. So let's say you have your book and you covered some of the topics I just pulled out for you, and you're meeting with someone at one of these conferences, and they say, I'm having a real problem with these new privacy laws. You're like, here's my book, read chapter 6. Let me know if you have any questions. Done. They already know now that you are the person that can solve their privacy issues. And the stigma of self-publishing, if you did it 10 years ago, the process has changed so much, even in the last 3 years, that if you didn't know it and you ordered a book that Pen for Hire has helped someone put out on Amazon or one from Wiley, you cannot tell the difference. The printing quality is so good.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it was more than 10 years ago I did mine, and it was very hard finding resources and, figuring the whole thing out. But I think it's probably a lot easier now. Yeah.
Yeah, when I first started thinking about writing a book, I went the traditional route. I talked to publishers. They wanted to see my draft. But what I found was, like, a dear friend of mine, he spent over $65,000 in his book through a publisher. And at the end of the day, the publisher counted on him to get it in stores, counted on his network to sell the book. There's some great publishers out there. It depends on your why. Why are you writing the book? Are you wanting to establish competence and build trust? I don't know that you need a publisher for that. If what you want is when you're walking through the airport, you see your book in all the different bookstores, you might need a publisher for that. My why was I just wanted to share the process that I use to help people in case they can't afford to work with me. And if they want to work with me, they're going to know very quick, a very small section, kind of like your marketing business. Not a lot of businesses want to grow 20% or more a year. They want to do 5, 3. I boldly, with Matt's help, decided on, if you want to really scale your business, 20%, 30%, 50%, work with me. That really narrowed my audience out there. But what I'm finding is those people are finding it. And for whatever reason, Matt, I'm selling more books in Japan than I am in the United States. Because now you're global.
And to your point about the gentleman who paid all that money, whether he sold the book or not, didn't his book land him like a 6-figure contract for the last 5 years plus?
Yes.
So
yeah, he had one customer that came out of the book, and that customer, I think he said, in 5 years generated $490,000. So, he went the traditional route. He paid a lot of money. It took him 3 years to write the book, but he still got a return on that investment.
Yeah.
We did it in 6 months and a fraction of what your friend spent.
Oh, significant fraction. And then the second one was in 2 months or 3 months. So.
Yeah, and publishers now, because they cut all their staff, they do expect the authors to handle the marketing, which is not for the faint of heart, obviously.
And I want to address Jamie's comment in the chat, but I will also say, and I tell this, unapologetically to folks when they come to me, if your goal is to sell 1 million copies of a book or hit an Amazon bestseller, New York Times bestseller, there are companies out there that'll do that for you. They'll charge you 6 figures, and they'll game the system however they have to. At the end of the day, I don't care. That's not what we're doing here. I want my clients to have a tangible business tool that they can use and do it for a budget that fits into something where they don't feel like they're betting the entire farm on, will this pan out?
Mhm.
So Jamie here said, turning 35 next month. Audiobooks is my big thing. I consume them as if I'm binging Netflix. I love it. I only get tangible books when there is a workbook that makes sense to have guided with each chapter, or if there are visuals I want to experience. It's also accessible to have both, as everyone learns differently. So Jamie, that is a great point. And I can tell you firsthand, several of my clients, after writing their book, decided to do a companion workbook, or a field manual, whatever they called it, but it was much more interactive. So some of their clients, maybe folks like-minded to you, started with that, and then they bought the book to kind of help them figure out how to do the workbook. As when it comes to audiobooks, they are absolutely a great option. The only physical books I read are fiction. If it's nonfiction, my Audible is stacked the same as yours, Jamie. There is a more significant cost to audiobooks. We do have partners we can refer out our clients when they're done to. I, with business books, do usually advise narrating them yourself if you can, get the right environment and tools where it sounds professional, because then your reader, your listener, is getting a lot more of your personality shining through. They really feel like they know you because they're listening to you talk. But if you hired a professional narrator, that's fine too. Just do not skimp on the cost of the audiobook production. I listened to one recently, and I have to say I was so disappointed because the author spoke like, and I could not believe it got past the quality control. I listened to a chapter and I was like, I was excited for the book. Okay. Like, it was a book that I was really looking forward to getting to. And after a chapter, it was just so painful that I had to give up on it. So good point, Jamie. But yes, same thing with a book. A book can tremendously help your career, but putting out a bad book is worse than not having a book at all.
And one of the big benefits I found working with you, Matt, and your team is, I'm not a professional writer. So of course, every word I put out, I think is brilliant. But what your team did a great job of is boiling it down. I think if we originally would have done everything that I recommended, it would have been like a 300-page book, right? But you made it concise enough and make sense enough. And I think one of your editors, when I was on the phone with her, she mentioned that, we're thinking about the reader's journey and the reader experience. And that's one of the big benefits that your team offered me. Was I didn't look at it from that standpoint. I wanted to help everybody. I wanted to give them all my content. And what she did was she said, look, you don't need to give them all of this. Think about the person reading the book. So again, I highly recommend, if somebody wants to do a book, that, they engage with your team, because not only do you organize it and, correct the English where it needs to be corrected, but you take a whole different look on, the reading experience and making sure that the reader enjoys the book.
Thank you. And you hit on something, a really key point that I want to tie into a lot of what Jamie was saying, and even Ava with the younger people today. 300 pages is a fiction novel. 300 pages in the business world, no one is going to read your book. So even if you have 300 pages worth of content, figure out how to distill it down to somewhere between 175 and 225 pages. Anything on like 150-ish is kind of your bare minimum where someone's going to look at it and at least see some value. Anything over the 225, 250 mark, they're not even going to buy it because they know they're not going to read it. It's going to seem unattainable. And that ties into that reader's journey. You want them to feel like they're getting their money's worth, but not getting overwhelmed. Any other questions?
No, I just appreciate your team's help. I'm getting meetings with people at higher levels in organizations than I've ever had before. People are handing my book around, and it's turning into a lot of speaking engagements, which ultimately turns into work. So, it depends on what your why is. And my why was just to share my model that I've discovered over the last 40 years and hope that it helps some people. And in so doing, it turned into, you know, basically remodeling my business. Right now I'm a driving explosive growth coach. I mean, I own that now. That's the title of my book.
And when it comes to SEO for all the marketing folks, I mean, that's huge because it ties back in with that no smoke and mirrors #1 sales blog. And just what you're doing when you're writing books is you're building brand collateral. But I thank everyone for your time today. Hopefully I demystified a little bit of, what's actually going into the process. That's, and again, not to say that if you have no content, we can't write you a book from scratch. We do it all the time. But for everyone pretty much that's been on this call, it's clear if you wanted to write a book, you have everything you need to get started. So hopefully you can take that away from this call and then just decide you want to and what your goal is. But if anyone has any questions they want to take offline, my assistant will send out the presentation, mark contacts in there. My contact is in there. Always happy to have a one-to-one anytime after this to discuss your specific potential need or advice, whatever situation you be in, so that we're not, talking about it here in a group setting. So thank you all again. Mark, I appreciate you for helping set this up. Ava, Kevin, I appreciate you guys for sending over your information so I could use it as a case study. Jamie, appreciate you chiming in with your feedback and your own experiences. And hopefully we'll catch you guys in the next webinar.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew. I appreciate you featuring my work. And I did want to ask you, I have, I write this daily email 7 days a week. So I've been doing it for 2 years. So that's like 700. It's basically 700 blogs because I have everything like archived automatically to my website. So I always did imagine like, geez, they are very short emails, but still like 700, basically, I'll just say 700 complete thoughts maybe is the proper way to sort of categorize them at the beginning of like a book stage. So if someone, like myself just came in and was like, hey, I got this 700, complete thoughts. And like you said, there's kind of a theme there and sort of natural chapters starting to develop. Is that the kind of thing where is there like a package or a starter where someone who just on a limited budget and just wants to go, hey, I don't know, why not? I don't desperately need it, but it sounds pretty cool. And I'm into the idea of like, hey, yeah, book would be cool. Yeah, is there like a bare minimum of like, okay, for such and such, we'll put you, I don't know, is this making any sense? Like kind of a starter package? I don't even know what to call it, but yeah.
Honestly, we do everything from an initial like 90-minute strategy session, which is, it's very affordable. And in that 90 minutes, we'll go through all those high level questions that I threw out here. What do you want to accomplish from writing this book? Who's your target audience? What are the main concepts that you want to deliver in this book? And then after we have that in that 90 minutes, we would start going through your blog and identifying all of the different topics that you wrote about in those 7-second thoughts, pulling those out, putting those kind of in their proper containers. And within 1 or 2 of those strategy sessions, very well could have the entire roadmap for your book laid out. And then it's entirely up to you to say, all right, I'm confident in my writing. Now that you've given me this roadmap, you have your own basic writing prompts, right? Your 7-second newsletters, it's your thought, but now you can go in and you can really flesh it out because you're not trying to be brief. You're trying to take that 7 seconds and expand on it and do that for each of the chapters all on your own. And then come back to us and say, hey, can you edit this for me? And that would be a much lesser cost.
Okay. So there's an editing kind of a, I'll call it a packaging. I'm out of words today, but yeah, but there's an editing kind of a thing.
Yep, we do it all. We have some authors who they want to write the entire things themselves and they just want us to kind of hold them accountable. So I coach authors where we meet every week for an hour. I review their writing between. You probably don't need that because you have it all there. It would be more strategy. But my main goal is really just help people get their books out on their terms and on their budget. So if all you need is the strategy session, I'm going to figure out a way to, to make that work for your budget. If you come to me with absolutely nothing and you're like, I need the whole book and I have zero time to participate in this project, then yeah, you got to go for the full blown ghostwriter.
Cool. I love it. All right. Thanks so much, Matthew.
My pleasure. Thank you for the feedback.
Oh yeah.
Did I miss anyone else's last thoughts, or I'm happy to give you back some time in your morning?
Thank you. This was really helpful and interesting.
It was my pleasure. Thank you all for showing up. I appreciate your time. I know that's a commodity, and hopefully we'll all be in touch.
Thanks again, Matthew.
Thank you, guys.
See you, buddy.
Bye.